Poor little girls give play money to the doctor and ask, "Is this enough to buy a new heart for our mum?" A young billionaire sees the scene and takes unbelievable action. The smell of burnt coffee woke Haley up before the sun even rose. Her 5-year-old eyes snapped open in alarm as the strong aroma invaded the small bedroom she shared with her sister. Something was wrong. "Sophie, wake up," she whispered, shaking her younger sister's shoulder. Sophie mumbled and turned to the other side, clutching her threadbare blanket. At 4 years old, she still fought against waking up as if it were a daily battle. "There's a weird smell. Mommy never burns the coffee." Those words worked like magic. Sophie's eyes opened, sleep instantly replaced by worry. It was true. Clara never got the coffee wrong, not even on the hardest days. The two of them jumped out of bed, their bare feet silent against the cold floor. The apartment was small, but that morning it felt larger, as if the space between their room and their mother's had stretched overnight. Haley paused at Clara's bedroom door, hesitant. The door was ajar, letting a sliver of light escape. Normally, at 6 in the morning, Clara would already be ready for work, dressed in her grey uniform, hair tied back, and a tired smile on her face. But not that morning. "Mom," Haley called, pushing the door open slowly. What they saw froze the blood in the little girl's veins. Clara was sitting on the edge of the bed, still in her nightgown, her hair down and disheveled. Her hands were trembling, and her face was so pale it seemed almost transparent against the dim light of the lamp. "Mommy!" Sophie ran in, always the more impulsive of the two. Clara lifted her head slowly, as if the movement required immense effort. She tried to smile, but the result was just a tremor on her white lips. "Everything's fine, my little ones," she tried to say, her voice as faint as a whisper. "I just need to rest a little before—" She didn't finish the sentence. Her eyes rolled back and, in a movement that seemed to happen in slow motion for the girls, Clara slid from the edge of the bed to the floor like a discarded rag doll. "Mommy!" Haley's scream echoed through the apartment. Sophie stood paralyzed, her wide eyes fixed on her fallen mother, while Haley threw herself beside Clara, shaking her shoulder. "Mommy, wake up! Please, wake up!" Clara's face remained motionless, her lips now a frightening shade of blue. Haley felt a fear she had never experienced before, different from the fear of the dark or of thunderstorms. It was a fear that chilled her to the bone. "Sophie, go get help! Run!" The little girl seemed to snap out of her trance. She ran to the front door, struggling to open it, and went out into the building's hallway, screaming with all the force of her small lungs. "Help! My mom fell! Help!" The seconds that followed felt like hours to Haley, who stayed by Clara's side, holding her cold hand, repeating like a mantra, "It's going to be okay, Mommy. It's going to be okay." The first to arrive was Mrs. Miller from the apartment next door, still in her robe and slippers. Her eyes widened when she saw Clara on the floor. "Oh my God!" she exclaimed, rushing inside. She knelt beside Clara, checking her breathing and pulse. "Someone call an ambulance," she yelled over her shoulder. Soon, the small apartment was full. Mr. Rodriguez from the 3rd floor, already on the phone calling for help. Mrs. Patel from across the hall, bringing water and towels. While the adults moved in an organized chaos, Haley and Sophie were gently led to a corner of the living room. "Is she going to be okay?" Sophie asked, silent tears streaming down her round face. Haley swallowed her own fear. As the older sister, she knew she had to be strong. "Of course, she is," she said, but her voice trembled on the last word. The sound of the siren arrived before they could even hear the hurried footsteps on the stairs. 2 paramedics entered quickly, carrying equipment and speaking in terms the girls didn't understand. "Her blood pressure is very low, weak and irregular pulse. Possible cardiac failure." Haley watched everything intently, trying to understand what was happening. She saw them place a mask over her mother's face, lift her onto a stretcher, and fasten straps around her motionless body. "What about the kids?" one of the paramedics asked, finally noticing the 2 girls clinging to each other in the corner of the room. "I'll go with them," said Mrs. Miller, who had quickly gotten dressed. "They're her daughters. They can't be left alone." As they prepared to take Clara away, Haley remembered something. She ran to her mother's room, where on the nightstand was a small hand-painted wooden box. The magic box, as Clara called it, where she kept a few bills for emergencies. Haley grabbed the box and hugged it to her chest. This was what would save her mother. She was sure of it. Clara always said that money was for when we really, really need it. When she returned to the living room, the paramedics were already carrying Clara out the door. Haley ran, holding the box with one hand and pulling Sophie with the other. "Wait, we need to go with you." In the hallway, neighbors watched the scene with concerned expressions. Some offered help, others simply watched, helpless. Mrs. Miller held the two girls in hands, hurrying alongside the stretcher. "We're coming with you," she told the paramedics. They descended the stairs at a fast pace, the stretcher swaying dangerously on the turns. Outside, the ambulance waited, doors open, lights flashing against the early morning sky that was beginning to give way to dawn. "Mommy?" Sophie cried, trying to break free to get closer. Haley held her sister tightly. "They're going to take care of her," she said, with a conviction she didn't feel. As they loaded Clara into the ambulance, Haley held the small wooden box tighter. The paramedics worked quickly, connecting tubes and monitors. Mrs. Miller was negotiating with them, insisting that the children needed to accompany their mother. "They're too young, Mom," one of them said. "They have no one else," she replied firmly. "I'm going with them." They were finally allowed in, squeezed into a corner of the ambulance. The vehicle lurched forward, the siren cutting through the morning silence. Sophie cried softly, her face hidden in Mrs. Miller's shoulder. But Haley didn't cry. Her eyes were fixed on her mother's pale face, on the mask that fogged up with each weak breath, on the machines that beeped in an irregular rhythm. The small box felt heavy in her little hands, as if it contained much more than just a few bills. In her child's mind, that box represented hope, the only thing that could save Clara. As the ambulance sped through the deserted city streets, Haley leaned closer to her mother and whispered, so low that no one else could hear, "I'm going to save you, Mommy, I promise." The promise hung in the air, heavier than any adult oath. In her 5-year-old innocence, Haley had no idea how she would fulfill such a promise, but she was determined. The box in her hands would be the key, she was certain. The ambulance turned a corner, sped down an avenue, and finally stopped with a jolt. The doors opened, revealing the brightly lit entrance of the hospital. As they took out the stretcher with Clara, Haley clutched the box to her chest and took a deep breath. Their last normal morning was over. The race to save their mother had just begun. The hospital swallowed the girls like a big white cold mouth. Haley held Sophie's hand as they followed Mrs. Miller down endless corridors. Clara had been taken away by another team, disappearing behind automatic doors that closed with a hiss. The fluorescent lights flickered occasionally, turning the faces around them into pale masks. The smell of disinfectant permeated everything, the walls, the air, even their skin. Haley pressed the wooden box against her chest as if it were a talisman. "You need to wait here," a nurse said, pointing to hard chairs in the waiting room. "The doctor will come speak with you as soon as he has news." Sophie huddled next to her older sister. Her eyes, red from crying, watched the people passing by. Hurried nurses, patients in wheelchairs, family members with worried expressions. "I'm scared," Sophie whispered. "Me too," Haley admitted, keeping her voice steady. "But Mommy is strong." Time dragged on. Mrs. Miller stepped out to call her work, explaining she wouldn't be in that day. When she returned, she brought cups of water and some packaged cookies she got from a vending machine in the hallway. "Eat a little," she said gently. "It will be a while before we have news." Haley didn't feel hungry, but she convinced Sophie to eat half a cookie. The clock on the wall showed almost 9 in the morning when a man in a white coat with a serious expression approached them. "Are you the family of a Mrs. Clara Jensen?" he asked, consulting a clipboard. Mrs. Miller stood up, with the girls right behind her. "I'm her neighbor. These are her daughters, Haley and Sophie." The doctor looked at the children, and something in his gaze shifted, a mix of compassion and discomfort. He gestured toward a small room to the side. "Can we talk in there?" The room had only a table and a few chairs. The doctor closed the door and sat across from them. His hands, clasped on the table, seemed heavy. "My name is Dr. Roberts. I'm taking care of your mother," he began, his voice calm. We've run several tests and we've found the problem. Haley leaned forward, clutching the box tightly. Is she going to get better? She asked, straight to the point. The doctor took a deep breath. The situation is critical. Your mother's heart is very sick. She's going to need a transplant. What's that? Sophie asked, confused. It means she needs a new heart, Dr. Roberts explained. She'll be put on the waiting list for a heart, but that could take a long time. The word long hung in the room like a dark cloud. Haley was silent for a moment, processing the information. Then, with deliberate movements, she placed the box on the table and opened it. Inside were a few colorful bills, all the money Clara had managed to save over the last few months. With all the seriousness her 5 years could muster, Haley took the bills and arranged them on the table in front of the doctor. Is this enough to buy a new heart for our mum? She asked, looking directly into Dr. Roberts' eyes. The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. The doctor looked at the bills, maybe $200 or $300 in total, and then at the girl's hopeful face. His professional composure wavered. He lowered his head, visibly emotional, not knowing how to respond. Outside the room, in the hallway, a man stopped. Tall in a well-tailored suit, he was holding a coffee he had just bought at the cafeteria. Through the glass window of the room, Ian Blackwood, 32 and CEO of a tech company, watched the scene as if it were a silent movie. He couldn't hear the words, but he clearly saw the little girl push the money toward the doctor. Something about that scene hit him like a punch. It froze him in place and the coffee forgotten in his hand. The image awakened a memory he had kept locked away for years, himself, at 12, offering all his savings to a very similar doctor. Please, save my mom. The doctor had been kind but powerless. Some illnesses couldn't be cured with any amount of money, he had explained. Not back then, not in that hospital, not for his mother. Ian watched the doctor inside the room struggle to find words. He saw the younger girl's small hands gripping the chair, her knuckles white with tension. Without realizing it, he approached the door and knocked lightly. Doctor. Roberts looked up, surprised. Ian entered, offering a brief smile to the children. Excuse me, doctor. Can I speak with you for a minute? The doctor seemed relieved by the interruption. He excused himself to the girls and Mrs. Miller and followed Ian into the hallway. Sorry to intrude, Ian said, but I couldn't help but notice the situation. What's the patient's condition? Dr. Roberts hesitated, glancing at the visitor's badge Ian was wearing. Are you a relative, sir? No, but I want to help, Ian replied firmly. What's the real situation? The doctor lowered his voice. Severe cardiomyopathy. She needs a transplant urgently, but with her rare blood type and the current waiting list? Honestly, the chances aren't good. And how much does the treatment cost until a compatible donor is found? Without adequate insurance, hundreds of thousands, and then the surgery itself, recovery, anti-rejection drugs. Ian nodded thoughtfully. Through the window, he saw the girls waiting, the older one still looking at the small pile of money on the table. Let's go back inside, he said decisively. When they returned to the room, the girls' eyes fixed on them, full of hope and fear. Ian approached the table and sat in the chair next to the doctor. Haley looked at him, her eyes too wise for her age, and asked in a trembling voice, "If it's not enough, can you help us save more?" Something broke inside Ian at that moment. 20 years of cold ambition, of ruthless corporate climbing, of superficial relationships. It all seemed insignificant in the face of that simple question. He knelt down to be at the girls' level, looking them in the eyes. "I'm going to help you," he said, his voice gentler than anyone who knew him would have thought possible. "I promise." Haley's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes, a glimmer of hope, appeared. "Do you know our mommy?" Sophie asked, curious. "No," Ian answered honestly, "but that doesn't matter." He turned to the doctor. "I want to cover all the treatment costs, whatever she needs, and I want you to use your influence to expedite the process of finding a compatible donor." Dr. Roberts looked stunned. "Sir, that's very generous, but we're talking about figures that the amount doesn't matter," Ian interrupted. "Where do I sign?" 30 minutes later, Ian Blackwood had signed more documents than in many corporate deals. Payment authorizations, financial responsibility forms. even a document requesting that Clara Jensen be transferred to a private room with the best possible care. Mrs. Miller watched it all with a mixture of amazement and relief. She had called some other neighbors, organizing who would look after the apartment and bring clothes for the girls. Haley gathered the bills from the table and carefully returned them to the box. She hugged it against her chest like a shield. Standing beside her, Sophie shyly approached Ian and leaned against his arm, a silent gesture of trust. "Thank you," Haley said, her voice small but firm. Ian swallowed hard, surprised by the emotion he felt. For the first time in years, he was doing something that wasn't aimed at increasing his wealth or influence. It was something simply human. "We're going to get your mum a new heart," he promised. Dr. Roberts returned to the room with new information. "I've secured a spot in the ICU for constant monitoring. We're going to do everything we can." As they left the room and headed for the elevator, Ian felt a light weight against his leg. Sophie had moved even closer, as if his presence offered some kind of safety. On the other side, Haley walked tall, the box held firmly in her hands, her eyes fixed on the path ahead. For a moment, the girls were not so alone. The elevator ascended to the 5th floor in silence. The numbers lit up one after another as Haley and Sophie remained glued to Ian, as if afraid he might disappear if they didn't maintain physical contact. Mrs. Miller accompanied them, still perplexed by how quickly this stranger had transformed the situation. "Cardiac ICU," announced the metallic voice of the elevator as the doors opened. Dr. Roberts was waiting for them in the hallway, talking to a nurse who was taking notes on a tablet. When he saw the group approaching, he gestured for them to follow him. "Clara is being settled in now," the doctor explained. "I'll show you where you can wait." As they walked down the brightly lit corridor, they passed a large glass window overlooking the ICU. Sophie stopped suddenly, her small body frozen in place. Through the glass, Clara could be seen lying in a bed surrounded by machines. Tubes and wires were connected to her still body. Her eyes were closed, her face as pale as paper. "Mommy," Sophie whispered, her tiny hand touching the glass. Ian gently placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "They're taking care of her," he said, keeping his voice calm. "All these machines are helping." Haley approached as well, observing her mother with serious eyes. "Why isn't she moving?" she asked. Dr. Roberts knelt down to speak directly to the girls. "Your mum is sedated right now. That means we've given her medicine to make her sleep very deeply. It's better for her heart at this moment." He led the group to a small waiting room near the ICU. Unlike the one downstairs, this one had plastic armchairs against the wall, a small central table with old magazines, and a water fountain in the corner. "You can wait here," the doctor said. "I'll be back soon to talk more." Mrs. Miller looked at the clock. "I need to make a few calls," she said. "I'll let the other neighbors know about the situation and arrange for someone to bring some clothes for you." When she left, Ian sat in one of the armchairs. The girls immediately took their places beside him, one on each side, like little guardians. "Are you hungry?" he asked. Sophie nodded shyly. Haley hesitated, but eventually nodded as well. "I'll order something for you to eat, and maybe some blankets. It's cold in here." He took out his phone and made a few quick calls. As he spoke, the girls watched him with curiosity, as if studying a rare and fascinating animal. 15 minutes later, Dr. Roberts returned. He sat in the armchair across from them and opened a file on his tablet. "I want to explain the situation better to you," he began, looking mainly at Ian but including the girls in his field of vision. "Clara has a condition called cardiomyopathy. That means her heart muscle is very weak and can't pump blood as it should." He paused, making sure everyone was following. "We've managed to stabilize her for now, but her heart is badly damaged. That's why we need a transplant." "How long until we can get a new heart?" Ian asked. The doctor sighed. "It's hard to say. It could be days, weeks, or longer. It depends on when a compatible heart becomes available." "And until then?" Ian's voice was calm but firm. "Until then, we need to keep her stable. Every day we can maintain her current state is a victory. Clara is very weak, and every day of stability is important so she can withstand the transplant when the time comes." Sophie, who had been listening in silence, gently tugged on the sleeve of the doctor's coat. "Is she going to wake up?" she asked softly, her voice almost a whisper. Dr. Roberts looked at the girl, compassion evident in his eyes. "We'll keep her sedated for now, so her heart doesn't have to work so hard. But in a few days, if everything goes well, we might try to reduce the sedation so she can wake up a little." Sophie nodded, absorbing the information in the way a 4-year-old could. "Can we see her?" Haley asked. "Yes, but only for a few minutes now, and only through the glass window. Later, when she's more stable, you'll be able to go in one at a time." When the doctor left, Ian noticed the girls were exhausted. The shock of the morning, the agonizing wait, the worry, it had all drained their energy. Sophie was struggling to keep her eyes open, leaning against Ian's arm. "Aren't you going home?" he asked. Haley shook her head firmly. "We can't leave Mommy." Ian looked at the two children, so small, so determined, so scared. "I'm not leaving," he promised. "You won't be alone." Something in the tone of his voice, in the firmness of his promise, seemed to calm the girls. Haley visibly relaxed, her small shoulders dropping a few millimeters. A nurse entered the room, carrying a tray with hot food and 3 large Ugg soft blankets. "Mr. Blackwood ordered this for you," she said, smiling gently at the girls. The tray held macaroni and cheese, pieces of chicken, some cooked vegetables, and a small bowl of red jello. Nothing fancy, but warm and comforting. Ian helped settle the trays on the girls' laps and unfolded the blankets, wrapping them up like little cocoons. Sophie ate slowly, her eyes still heavy with sleep. Haley ate methodically, as if completing this basic task helped her maintain control. "You should rest a little," Ian suggested after they finished. "It's been a tough morning." "I can't sleep," Haley said. "I keep thinking about Mommy." Ian understood. The fear of falling asleep and waking up to find that something terrible had happened. He knew that feeling well. "How about I tell you a story?" he suggested. Sophie's eyes lit up slightly. "Mommy always tells stories," she said. Ian smiled. "I'm probably not as good as she is, but I can try." He thought for a moment and then began. "Once upon a time, there were 2 very brave princesses who lived in a faraway kingdom. The story was simple, about 2 sisters who needed to find a magic flower to save their kingdom." Ian had never told stories to children before, but he found that the words came naturally. The girls listened attentively, occasionally asking questions or suggesting what should happen next. Sophie ended up falling asleep before the end of the story, her head resting against Ian's arm. Haley held on longer, but her eyes were also beginning to close. "Can you continue the story tomorrow?" she asked, fighting off sleep. "Of course," Ian promised. "Now get some rest." When they both finally fell asleep, Ian remained still, not wanting to disturb them. The plastic armchairs were uncomfortable, but he didn't care. The girls had managed to find sleeping positions, curled up in the blankets, using his arm as a pillow. Mrs. Miller returned shortly after, carrying a small backpack with clothes and personal items. "The neighbors all pitched in to help," she explained in a low voice. "They're going to look after the apartment and the bills while Clara is here." She looked at the girls asleep in the uncomfortable waiting room chairs. "You didn't even know them this morning," she observed, curious. "Why are you doing all this?" Ian looked at the small figures bundled in the blankets. "How someone has to," he replied simply. Mrs. Miller nodded, understanding. "I have to go now. My husband is waiting for me, and I have to work tomorrow. Are you sure you'll be okay with them?" "I'm sure," Ian assured her. "I'll take care of them." When Mrs. Miller left, silence filled the small room. Ian looked at the clock, almost 6 in the evening. A whole day had passed since he had entered that hospital for a simple routine checkup and ended up finding, what? A mission, a responsibility. He still couldn't define it. The hours passed slowly. Nurses came to check on the girls from time to time, offering extra pillows and updates on Clara. Stable was the word they used, not better, not worse, just fighting. Around 9 at night, Haley woke with a start. "Mummy!" she called out, disoriented. "It's okay," Ian soothed her. "Your mum is resting. Everything is the same." Haley rubbed her eyes, coming back to reality. She looked at her still sleeping sister, and then at Ian. "Why are you helping us?" she asked directly. with the raw honesty only children possess. The question caught Ian by surprise. He could have given a simple answer, something vague about doing the right thing. But there was something in Hayley's serious eyes that demanded the truth. "When I was 12, my mother got very sick," he told her, his voice low so as not to wake Sophie. "We didn't have money for the treatment she needed." Hayley listened intently. "And what happened?" "She didn't make it," Ian said, the words coming out with difficulty, "and I was left alone." "Like our dad," Hayley said, surprising Ian. "He died when I was 3. Sophie barely remembers him." Ian nodded, letting her continue. "Mommy always worked a lot," Hayley went on. "Sometimes 2 jobs. She cleaned offices and houses. At night, she would sew things to sell." "She's very brave," Ian observed. "Yes," Hayley agreed, "but sometimes she would cry when she thought we were asleep." The simplicity with which Hayley shared this information touched Ian deeply. There was no self-pity in her voice, just a statement of the facts that made up her reality. "My mom worked hard to raise me too," Ian said. "She cleaned big houses. Sometimes she would take me with her during school breaks." "Did you help her?" Hayley asked, curious. Ian smiled faintly. "Not as much as I should have. I was a stubborn kid." Hayley looked at him seriously. "But you're helping us now." It wasn't a question, but a statement, as if in Hayley's mind Ian was somehow making up for the past. "I'm trying," he replied. Sophie stirred, slowly waking up. She adjusted herself in the uncomfortable chair, looked around, confused for a moment, until her eyes met Ian's. "Friend man," she murmured sleepily, snuggling closer. Hayley smiled slightly. "That's what Sophie calls you," she explained. "Friend man." Ian felt a strange warmth in his chest, a warmth he couldn't remember feeling before. In his world of corporate meetings, mergers, and acquisitions, no one had ever called him a friend, much less with the disarming sincerity of a 4-year-old child. "I must be uncomfortable in these chairs," he said, trying to hide the emotion in his voice. "I'll see if I can get something better." "Can we see Mommy first?" Sophie asked, now more awake. "Of course," Ian agreed. "Let's go." He took the girls to the ICU observation window. Clara remained motionless, surrounded by machines monitoring every beat of her weakened heart. A nurse was adjusting some medication in her IV drip. "Hi, Mommy," Sophie whispered, as if Clara could hear her through the glass. "The friend man is taking care of us." Hayley stood in silence, just watching. Her small hand still held the wooden box as always. "Let's go back to the room," Ian suggested after a few minutes. "We can see her again tomorrow." When they returned to the waiting room, Ian arranged the armchairs as best he could, pushing some together to form a larger surface where the girls could lie down. With the blankets and some extra pillows a kind nurse brought, he managed to create a minimally comfortable place for them to rest. "I'll be sitting right here," Ian said, pointing to the armchair next to them. "I'll be here if you need anything during the night." "Promise?" Sophie asked, her voice small in the quiet room. "I promise," Ian replied, feeling the weight of that simple word. "Good night, friend man," Sophie murmured, her eyes already closed. "Good night," Ian replied. As the girls slept on the makeshift beds made of hospital armchairs, Ian remained seated, vigilant. He was uncomfortable and tired, but strangely at peace. Looking at the 2 small sleeping figures, Ian experienced something he hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. The night would be long in that cold, impersonal waiting room, but Ian didn't mind. For the first time in years, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The 3rd day in the hospital began with the same routine. Ian woke up with an aching back after another night in the uncomfortable waiting room chairs. Hayley and Sophie were still asleep, bundled under the blankets like puppies seeking warmth. He got up silently and went to the ICU window to check on Clara. Dr. Roberts was there, checking the monitors and taking notes. When he saw Ian, he came out to talk to him. "Good morning." "No major changes, but that's good in this case. She's holding on." Ian nodded, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "How long until they can reduce the sedation?" "Maybe tomorrow, if her numbers stay stable," the doctor replied. But it will be for short periods, just to assess her response." When Ian returned to the waiting room, Sophie was awake, looking around with sleepy eyes. "Good morning," he said, softening his voice. "Did you sleep well?" She shrugged, rubbing her eyes. "I dreamed about Mommy." "Was it a good dream?" "She was making pancakes," Sophie answered. "With syrup." Ian's stomach rumbled, reminding him that they all needed a decent breakfast. The snacks from the hospital cafeteria weren't enough. "Do you like pancakes?" he asked, trying to keep the conversation light. Sophie's eyes lit up briefly. "Mommy used to make them on special days. But it's been a long time." There was something in the way she said it, a resigned acceptance that no 4-year-old should have. "How long?" Sophie counted on her fingers, concentrating. "Many days, since Mommy got sad because she lost her job." Ian felt a tightness in his chest. Clara had been laid off from his company, a detail he still hadn't fully processed. "She lost her job?" he asked gently. Sophie nodded, fiddling with the edge of her blanket. "A man came and said they didn't need her anymore. Then Mommy cried a lot. Then there were no more pancakes." Haley woke up at that moment, sitting up abruptly as if ready to face the day, regardless of her fatigue. "Is Sophie talking about Mommy?" she asked, immediately alert. "She was telling me about the pancakes," Ian replied. Haley looked at her sister with an expression that seemed far too adult for her 5 years. "Mommy said we could still have special days without pancakes." "But there were days without dinner too," Sophie added, with the brutal honesty of young children. Ian felt like he'd been punched. "A no dinner?" Haley took on her role as the older sister, as if she needed to explain things to Ian. "Sometimes Mommy would say she wasn't hungry and gave us her food, but her tummy would make noises." "She said she ate at work," Sophie completed. "But I think that was a lie." Ian looked at the two girls, their thin faces framed by hair that needed a good trim. Their clothes, he now noticed, were clean but very worn. The cuffs of Haley's sleeves were frayed, and Sophie's dress had careful patches on the seams. A wave of guilt hit him. While he was dining in expensive restaurants and complaining when his coffee wasn't at the perfect temperature, Clara, who had probably cleaned his office countless times, was going hungry to feed her daughters. "I'm going to get us some breakfast," he said, standing up abruptly. "And then I need to make some calls." In the hallway, Ian leaned against the wall for a moment, taking a deep breath. The realization of the contrast between his life and that of these children stunned him. All his professional success, his achievements, his penthouse apartment, and his imported car suddenly seemed empty. After bringing sandwiches and juice for the girls, Ian stepped away to make some calls, first to his assistant, telling her he would be extending his medical leave indefinitely, then to his lawyer to check on the legal situation of Clara and the girls. When he returned, he found a nurse trying to comb Sophie's tangled hair, who was making faces with every undone knot. "They need a bath," the nurse said kindly, "and clean clothes." Ian realized he hadn't thought about the girls' basic needs. They had been wearing the same clothes for 3 days. "There's a shower at the end of the hall you can use," the nurse continued. "And we have some children's hospital gowns, but they aren't very comfortable." "I'll take care of it," Ian said, determined. An hour later, after getting permission from Dr. Roberts, Ian took the girls to a department store near the hospital. Their eyes widened as they entered the huge establishment, with its bright lights and aisles full of merchandise. "Choose whatever you need," and he told them. "Clothes, shoes, pajamas." The girls hesitated as if they didn't understand what was happening. "Can I really choose?" Sophie asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Of course," Ian replied. "Whatever you want." Shyly, Sophie pointed to a simple dress with little flowers. "That one is pretty." Haley remained quiet, looking at the floor. "What's wrong?" Ian asked, crouching down to her level. "Mommy always told us not to ask for things," Haley explained, "because there was no money." Ian felt a lump in his throat. "Today is different," he said softly. "You can choose whatever you want. Your mum would want you to have new clothes." Gradually, the girls began to relax. With the help of a patient saleswoman, they chose basic clothes, a few dresses, pants, blouses, socks, and new shoes. Ian added warm coats, soft pajamas, and some personal hygiene items. As they passed the toy section, Sophie stopped, looking with fascination at a small rag doll. "We can get some toys too," Ian offered. Sophie's eyes sparkled, but she looked at her older sister as if asking for permission. "Will Mommy be mad?" she asked. Hayley looked as lost as her sister. Ian intervened. "I'm sure she'll be happy to know you have something to keep you busy while you're at the hospital." He let each of them choose 2 toys. Sophie picked the ragdoll and a small memory game. Hayley, after much deliberation, chose a storybook with illustrations and a simple drawing kit. Back at the hospital, after a warm shower in the facilities indicated by the nurse, the girls looked transformed in their new clothes. Sophie couldn't stop smoothing her floral dress, while Hayley seemed taller in her new sneakers. "Thank you," Hayley said formally when they were back in the waiting room. Ian smiled, feeling a satisfaction he had never experienced with any professional achievement. "No need to thank me. You deserve nice things." The afternoon passed more calmly. The girls played with their new toys, alternating between moments of childish fun and periods of silent worry, when their eyes turned to the door, waiting for news. Dr. Roberts appeared around 4 o'clock, bringing updates on Clara. Her condition remained stable. The medications were working to keep her heart beating while they waited for a donor. "Tomorrow we'll try to reduce the sedation for a short period," he explained. "If all goes well, you'll be able to talk to her for a few minutes." The news brought a wave of hope. The girls were excited, making plans about what they would tell their mother. "I'm going to show her my new dress," Sophie exclaimed. "And I'll tell her we've been good," Hayley added, always concerned with responsibilities. Night fell, bringing with it that heavy sense of suspended time that seems to permeate all hospitals after dark. The hallways grew quieter, the lights softer. The tension, however, remained constant. Every time an alarm sounded somewhere, the girls would freeze, fearing it was related to their mother. "It's hard to sleep here," Hayley commented, looking at the clock on the wall that read 9:30. Ian agreed. The nights in the hospital seemed endless, especially for young children. "How about we read a little from your new book?" he suggested, pointing to the storybook Hayley had chosen. Her eyes lit up. "Will you read to us?" "Of course," Ian replied, taking the book she handed him. The girls settled into the makeshift beds on the armchairs, Sophie hugging her new doll, Hayley with her attentive eyes fixed on the book. Ian began to read the story about a little bear who got lost in the forest and found new friends who helped him get back home. His voice, normally used to command boardrooms and negotiate million-dollar contracts, now softened into the inflections of different characters, voices pausing dramatically at the right moments, making the girls laugh at the funny parts. Sophie fell asleep before the end, but Hayley held on until the last page, when the little bear was finally reunited with his family. "Did you like it?" Ian asked, closing the book. Hayley nodded, her eyes heavy with sleep. "You read almost as well as Mommy," she said, which Ian took as the highest possible compliment. As he tucked the blanket around her, Hayley surprised him by holding his hand. "Thank you for not leaving us alone," she said in a low voice, before closing her eyes. Ian sat motionless for a moment, Hayley's small hand still in his. The simplicity of that thank you hit him with unexpected force. In the weeks before this chance encounter, he had closed 3 major deals, bought a yacht and been mentioned in a prominent business magazine. None of it had given him 1,000th of the satisfaction he felt with those simple words. Sitting there, in the silence of the hospital night, watching the 2 girls finally sleeping peacefully, Ian began to re-examine everything he had considered important in his life. The emptiness he felt, even when surrounded by luxury and success, the absence of real connections, the constant feeling that something essential was missing. A nurse entered silently to check if they needed anything. "They finally fell asleep," Ian whispered. The nurse smiled. "You're a good father," she commented, before leaving. Ian didn't correct her. Father. A word he had never considered in relation to himself. His hectic lifestyle, focused exclusively on professional achievements, had never left room for thoughts of family. He looked at Hayley and Sophie, so vulnerable in their sleep. He wasn't their father, just a stranger who had crossed their path by chance. But in the last 3 days, he had felt more purpose than in years of corporate climbing. The early morning hours crept by slowly. Ian stayed awake, reflecting. Outside the window, the city glowed with its distant lights, indifferent to the small human dramas unfolding within those hospital walls. At some point, Ian fell asleep in the uncomfortable armchair. He dreamed of his own mother, not sick as in his usual nightmares, but smiling like in the rare photos he kept. In the dream, she looked at the two sleeping girls and then at him, with an expression of approval that Ian didn't remember seeing in life. He woke with a start to the ringing of his phone. It was his assistant, wanting to know when he would be back at work, mentioning important meetings and pending decisions. "I don't know when I'll be back," he answered, keeping his voice low so as not to wake the girls. "Reschedule everything. This is more important." He hung up before she could protest. For the first time in his career, Ian Blackwood had put something above work, and surprisingly, he felt no remorse. The next day would be crucial. Clara might be briefly woken from sedation. The girls could finally speak to their mother, even if only for a few minutes. And Ian. Ian had no idea what he would say to the woman who, without knowing it, had sparked a revolution in his life. He looked at the sleeping girls and made a silent promise. No matter what happened, he would not let them face this alone. Somehow, he would find a way to help Clara and her daughters, not just now in the emergency, but afterward, ensuring they would never again have to choose between making pancakes and having enough for dinner. The night was finally beginning to give way to a new day, a day that, Ian hoped, would bring some light to this family devastated by illness and poverty, and perhaps to himself as well. A week had passed since Ian had met Haley and Sophie in the hospital, 7 days that had completely transformed his perception of the world. That night, while the girls slept in their makeshift armchairs, Ian stepped out into the hospital corridor, needing a moment to breathe. The clock read 3:17 a.m. The hospital had entered those strange hours when time seemed frozen. Nurses moving silently between rooms, machines beeping at a steady rhythm, fluorescent lights casting pale shadows in the empty hallways. Ian walked to the large window at the end of the corridor. Outside, the city glowed, indifferent to the small drama unfolding within those walls. His reflection in the glass surprised him, unshaven with deep dark circles under his eyes, his hair unkempt, unrecognizable compared to the impeccable executive of a week ago. He took his phone out of his pocket, dozens of unread emails, voicemails from the board, reminders of missed meetings. His empire continued to run even without him. The realization came as a revelation. Everything he had built with so much effort was carrying on, regardless of his presence. Replaceable, dispensable. He went back to the waiting room and watched the girls sleeping. Sophie was hugging her new doll as if it were a treasure, her face relaxed in the deep sleep of children. Haley slept more restlessly, her hand still clutching the wooden box even in her sleep. A crystal-clear truth hit him. In his entire life of achievements, luxury apartments, imported cars, and robust bank accounts, he had never owned anything that truly mattered. Nothing that couldn't be bought, sold, or replaced. What he had were things, expensive objects, valuable properties, profitable investments. What he didn't have was purpose. Ian sat down slowly in the armchair next to the girls. His thoughts were interrupted when Haley stirred in her sleep, murmuring "Mommy," in a broken voice that broke his heart. That instinctively, Ian placed his hand on hers, a simple gesture that calmed her immediately. It was at that moment, in the silence of the hospital pre-dawn, that Ian made his decision. It wasn't something calculated or planned like the corporate strategies that dominated his professional life. It was a certainty that was born from some forgotten place within him. "I will protect you," he whispered, so low he wasn't even sure if he had said it out loud. "No matter what happens." The promise hung in the air, invisible but concrete. Ian knew his life had irrevocably changed. Even if Clara recovered completely, which he prayed would happen, he couldn't simply go back to being who he was before. He couldn't forget what he had witnessed, the silent courage of these children, the dignity amidst poverty, the genuine love they shared. He remembered his own childhood after he lost his mother, the years in foster homes, the suffocating loneliness, the constant feeling of not belonging anywhere. The pain that had turned him into an adult, focused only on accumulating financial security. as if enough money could fill the void left by lost love. He would not allow Haley and Sophie to go through that. Never. Morning arrived slowly, the pale light of dawn filtering through the blinds. Sophie was the first to wake, rubbing her eyes and looking around, momentarily confused about where she was. When she saw Ian, she smiled, a simple, confident smile that said more than any words. "Good morning, friend man," she said, her voice still hoarse from sleep. "Good morning, princess," Ian replied. "Did you sleep well?" Sophie nodded, hugging her doll. "I dreamed Mommy was making pancakes," Ian smiled, feeling a wave of tenderness that surprised him with its intensity. "Maybe we can make pancakes when your mom gets better." Haley woke up next, immediately alert as always. Her first instinct was to check the wooden box, making sure it was still safe. "Any news about Mommy?" she asked, practical as ever. "Nothing new. Dr. Roberts should be by soon to tell us how she spent the night." As the girls got ready in their new clothes, Ian watched their movements, the way they cared for each other, Haley helping Sophie tie her shoes, Sophie fixing her older sister's hair. The intimacy between them, born not only from blood ties but from the necessity of survival. Dr. Roberts appeared an hour later, bringing cautiously optimistic news. Clara had had a good night, her vitals were stable, and she had responded well to the partial reduction in sedation done overnight. "If everything continues like this, we might be able to allow a quick visit this afternoon," the doctor informed them. The girls received the news with a mix of anxiety and joy. Ian felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He needed to prepare them for what they would see, for their mother's fragile state, for the limitations of that encounter. As he helped Sophie comb her hair, preparing her for the moment she would see her mother, Ian realized something had changed within him. The feeling of emptiness that had accompanied him for years, even amidst professional success, had been replaced by something new, a real purpose. It wasn't just about helping financially or ensuring the best medical treatment for Clara. It was about being present, about offering not just resources but himself, about building something that money couldn't buy: connection, trust, emotional security. Ian Blackwood, the ruthless CEO, the calculating negotiator, the committed bachelor who valued his freedom above all else, was slowly disappearing. In his place, someone he didn't even recognize yet was emerging, a man capable of telling bedtime stories, combing a child's hair, and making promises he intended to keep at any cost. Haley approached, holding a drawing she had made with her new kit, 4 figures holding hands under a bright sun. "This is for Mommy," she explained. "So it's us, me, Sophie, Mommy, and you." Ian felt his throat tighten. That simple, childish drawing confirmed what his heart already knew. He had found a place where he belonged, a family that had welcomed him without question, without demanding credentials or achievements. "Do you think she'll like it?" Haley asked, with a rare insecurity in her voice. "She's going to love it," Ian replied, absolutely certain. At that moment, contemplating the colorful drawing in his hands, Ian felt the first seed of a true change sprout within him, a clear, genuine purpose that couldn't be measured in numbers or highlighted in annual reports. Finally, after years of building a fortress of material success, Ian Blackwood had found something real to protect. The morning of the 10th day in the hospital brought a subtle change in the air. Ian noticed it as soon as he opened his eyes. The oppressive weight of waiting seemed a little lighter. The girls were still asleep, Sophie with her cheek pressed against the arm of the chair, Haley curled up like a little snail under the blanket. The hospital corridor was busier than usual. Nurses hurried past, exchanging information in low voices. Ian stood up, stretching his sore muscles after another night in the uncomfortable chair. During the week, he had managed to get mats for the girls to sleep on, but for himself, he maintained the Spartan routine, as if physical discomfort were a small penance for years of indifference. "Mr. Blackwood," a nurse called, approaching with quick steps. "Dr. Roberts is looking for you. He's in Clara's room." Ian felt a knot in his stomach. For the past few days, the news had always been the same: stable. That word that meant both no better and no worse. What could have changed? "The girls are still sleeping," he replied. "Should I wake them?" "The doctor said he'd like to speak with everyone, but he can talk to you first." Ian hesitated, looking at the sleeping children. He decided not to disturb them yet. They had already faced enough anxiety. "I'll keep an eye on them," the nurse offered, noticing his concern. With a final glance at the girls, Ian followed the nurse down the corridor towards the ICU. His heart beat faster with every step. In 10 days, he had developed a strange routine. He worked remotely for a few hours while the girls drew or read, talked with doctors, made sure everyone ate properly, and read stories before bed. A life completely different from the one he led before, and yet strangely natural. Dr. Roberts was standing by Clara's bedside, analyzing monitors and taking notes. When he saw Ian, his face broke into what looked like a restrained smile, the first positive expression Ian had seen on the doctor since this nightmare began. "Mr. Blackwood," the doctor greeted, gesturing for them to step into the hallway. "I have news." Ian followed him, bracing himself for any scenario. "Her condition has improved, Doctor," Roberts said, his expression visibly relieved. "The medications are working better than we expected. Her cardiac function is still compromised, but we've achieved significant stability." "What does that mean in practical terms?" Ian asked, wary of premature hopes. "It means that if a compatible heart becomes available, she can undergo the surgery," the doctor explained. "A week ago, I wouldn't have been sure if she could withstand the operation. Now I'm confident she can." Ian felt his legs weaken slightly. He leaned against the wall, absorbing the information. "And what are the chances of finding a heart?" "It's still a difficult wait, I won't lie, but the improvement in her condition buys us more time, and time is everything when it comes to transplants." "Is she awake?" "Yes," the doctor confirmed. "We significantly reduced the sedation last night. She's conscious, weak, but lucid. She asked for her daughters immediately." Ian nodded, feeling a wave of relief mixed with apprehension. Clara was awake. After 10 days, he could finally meet the woman whose daughters he had been caring for. "I'll get the girls," he said. When he returned to the waiting room, Haley was already awake, methodically organizing her colored pencils. Sophie was still asleep. "Good morning," Ian said, trying to contain the emotion in his voice. "I have news." Haley looked up at him, immediately alert. "Is it Mom? Did something happen?" "Good news," Ian assured her quickly. "The doctor said she's better, much better." Haley dropped her pencils, her eyes widening. "Is she going to be okay?" "She'll still need a new heart," Ian explained, always honest with the girls, "but she's stronger now." "And," he paused, knowing how much the next piece of information would mean, "she's awake, and she wants to see you." Haley froze for a second, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then, in a sudden movement, she jumped from her chair and ran to shake her sister. "Sophie, wake up, Mommy's better. We get to see her." Sophie woke up confused, blinking several times before understanding what Haley was saying. When she finally understood, her face lit up like a little sun. "Now? Can we go now?" Ian smiled, infected by their joy. "Yes, right now. But first, let's get ready, okay? Your mum will want to see you looking pretty." It was a small commotion. Brushing teeth in the hospital bathroom, combing hair, changing clothes. Sophie insisted on wearing the floral dress Clara hadn't seen yet. Haley chose her most colorful shirt, the one that made her eyes look brighter. "Do you think Mommy will like my hair like this?" Sophie asked, showing off the hairstyle Ian had learned to do, a simple braid tied with a blue ribbon. "She'll love it," he assured her, adjusting the bow. When they were ready, Haley picked up the wooden box she never abandoned. She held it with both hands, as if carrying something infinitely precious. "I'm going to show Mommy I kept it safe," she explained, noticing Ian's gaze. The walk to Clara's room seemed endless. The girls walked more slowly now, the initial excitement replaced by a mix of joy and nervousness. Ian guided them gently, a hand on each of their backs, offering the silent security of his presence. "And what if she looks different?" Haley whispered as they got closer. "She's still the same person," Ian assured her. "She's just weak and needs to rest a lot." "Will she be able to come home with us?" Sophie asked. "Not right now, Princess. She still needs to stay in the hospital until she gets a new heart." Sophie nodded, accepting the explanation with a resignation that Ian still found surprising in such a young child. When they reached the door of the room, Clara had been transferred from the ICU to a private room that same morning. Dr. Roberts was waiting for them. "Remember, a short visit. She's very weak and can't get agitated," he instructed gently. "But she's anxious to see you." Haley and Sophie nodded solemnly, taking on the responsibility like little adults. Ian prepared to wait outside, giving the family privacy for their reunion. "Do you want to go in alone?" he asked. To his surprise, they both shook their heads. "You come too," Sophie said, taking his hand firmly. "Mommy needs to meet you," Haley added, seriously. Ian felt something warm in his chest. He agreed with a nod, too emotional to speak. The room was simple but comfortable, one of the best in the hospital, thanks to Ian's influence and resources. The light came in softened by the half-drawn curtains, creating a cozy atmosphere. In the center was the bed where Clara rested, connected to fewer machines now, but still constantly monitored. When the door opened, she turned her face toward the sound. Her eyes, the same shade of brown as Haley's, were tired but alert. Upon seeing her daughters, her face transformed, the fatigue giving way to a luminous smile that seemed to light up the entire room. "My loves," she said, her voice weak but clear. "Mommy." Sophie was the first to run, stopping abruptly beside the bed, remembering at the last minute that she needed to be careful. Haley advanced more slowly, the box held firmly in her hands, her eyes fixed on her mother as if trying to absorb every detail. Clara extended her arms, trembling slightly with the effort. The girls approached, and she hugged them with what little strength she had. "I missed you so much," Clara whispered, silent tears streaming down her pale face. Ian remained at the door, suddenly feeling like an intruder in this sacred moment. He thought about stepping back, giving them privacy, but before he could move, Clara lifted her eyes and saw him. It was at that moment that everything changed. Her smile froze, replaced by a complex expression, surprise, recognition, and something that looked like shame. Her eyes widened slightly, and she instinctively adjusted the sheet over herself, as if trying to look more presentable. What are you doing here, sir?" she asked in a weak but clear voice. Ian frowned, confused. The way she spoke suggested she knew him, but he couldn't remember having seen her before. "I'm sorry." "Do we know each other?" he asked, taking a hesitant step into the room. Clara looked away briefly, a faint blush tinging her pale cheeks. I used to work as a cleaner in your company's building," she explained with difficulty. "I was let go a few months ago." Ian felt as if the floor had disappeared from under his feet. An awkward silence filled the room. Now he understood the missing pieces of the story. Clara had been one of the employees of the outsourced cleaning company that his administrative team had dismissed during recent cost cuts. He himself had signed the memo authorizing the staff reduction, never thinking about the real people affected by that business decision. He had never really looked at her, at any of them. The cleaning staff were invisible in his corporate world, nameless people who appeared and disappeared when no one was looking, keeping everything immaculate without ever being noticed. "The friend man took care of us every day, Mommy," Sophie interrupted, oblivious to the tension in the air. "Fani bought us new clothes and tells us stories before bed. And food," Haley added, practical as ever, "and he made the doctors take good care of you." Clara looked at her daughters and then back at Ian, confusion evident on her tired face. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Why would you do this for us?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Ian slowly approached the bed, feeling the weight of Clara's gaze. There was no simple answer. How could he explain that meeting her daughters had changed something fundamental within him? How could he justify that? After ignoring her existence when she worked for him, he was now completely involved in their lives. "I was at the hospital when your daughters arrived with you," he began, choosing his words carefully. "I saw Haley offering the money from the box to the doctor, wanting to buy a new heart for you." Clara looked at Haley, who now held up the box as proof that she had kept the family treasure safe. "I kept it safe, Mommy. I didn't spend anything." Clara reached out her hand, touching the box with reverence. "My love, You did that. Haley nodded seriously. But it wasn't enough. Then the friend man said he would help. Ian felt the weight of Clara's gaze again. There were so many unasked questions in those tired eyes. Suspicion, confusion, gratitude. I wanted to help, Ian said simply. I needed to help. You didn't recognize me, Clara observed. No, Ian admitted, the shame evident in his voice. I never really looked at the people who worked in the building. Another silence. Ian realized how inadequate his words were, how insufficient to explain the transformation that had occurred within him. But now, I see, he continued, his voice firmer, and I can't undo the past, but I can do better now. Making a decision, he moved closer and gently took Clara's hand. He felt how fragile it was, her thin fingers marked by years of hard work. That doesn't matter now, he said with sincerity. I just want you to rest easy. I came to help, and I will continue to help for as long as it takes. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but no sound came out. She just shook her head, too emotional to speak. Is Mommy crying because she's happy? Sophie asked, concerned. Clara managed to smile through her tears. Yes, my love. Sometimes we cry when we're happy too. The girls snuggled closer to their mother, careful not to hurt her. Ian took a step back, giving them space for their family moment. He watched the scene, Clara hugging her daughters, Haley still holding the box, Sophie chattering about the stories Ian told before bed. Dr. Roberts appeared at the door, giving a discreet signal that their time was up. Ian nodded in acknowledgement. Girls, we need to let your mum rest a little now, he said gently. But we just got here, Sophie protested. And we can come back later, Ian assured her. Your mum needs to get her strength back. Clara looked at Ian with an expression he couldn't quite decipher, gratitude mixed with something more complex. Thank you, she said simply, for taking care of them, for everything. Ian nodded, unable to express in words how much these 10 days had meant to him too. How could he say that in trying to save their mother, he himself had been saved in some way? We'll be back soon, he promised. As he guided the girls out of the room, Ian felt a weight lifting. Clara was better. There was a long road ahead. But for the first time since this nightmare began, there was real hope. In the hallway, Sophie took his hand. Mommy will like you when she gets to know you better, she declared with the absolute certainty of children. Ian smiled, surprised by the little one's insight. You think so? Sophie nodded solemnly. Yes, because you're the friend man, and everyone likes friends. The simplicity of the child's logic touched him deeply. As they walked back to the waiting room, Ian reflected on the strange path life sometimes takes. He never imagined he would be called a friend by someone to whom he had, inadvertently, caused hardship. But children saw the truth more clearly than adults, he thought. And the truth was that, somehow, he had found a more meaningful connection with these two little girls and their sick mother than with anyone in his adult life so far. The phone rang at 3:47 a.m. Ian woke with a jolt, answering before he had even fully opened his eyes. He now slept in a reclining chair that the hospital staff had provided, next to the girls who finally had decent makeshift beds in the waiting room. Mr. Blackwood, Dr. Roberts' voice sounded different, a controlled urgency that made Ian sit up immediately. Yes, doctor. Did something happen? A compatible heart has become available. The words hung in the air like an impossible promise. A hospital in Denver contacted the transplant network 20 minutes ago. The characteristics are compatible with Clara. We are confirming the final details, but we need to prepare everything now. Ian felt a shiver run down his spine. After 2 weeks of waiting, the news came when they least expected it. How much time do we have? The organ will arrive in approximately 2 hours. The team is already being mobilized. We need to prepare Clara immediately. We'll be there in 5 minutes. Ian hung up and looked at the sleeping girls. He hesitated for a moment. Should they be woken up for such important news, or could they sleep a little longer before the whirlwind that was to come? He decided on immediate honesty. In the past few days, he had learned that Haley and Sophie were much stronger than their size suggested. Girl, he called softly, touching each of their shoulders. "Wake up. I have important news." Haley opened her eyes immediately. Always alert, Sophie took longer, rubbing her face with her small fists. "What is it?" Haley asked, already sitting up in bed. "They found a heart for your mum," Ian said, keeping his voice calm despite the emotion he felt. "It's on its way here now." Haley's eyes widened, suddenly awake. "A new heart." "For real?" "Yes, Dr. Roberts just called. We have to go over there now. They're going to prepare your mum for the surgery." "Is Mommy going to be okay?" Sophie asked, still sleepy, but understanding the gravity of the moment. "The doctors will do their very best," Ian answered honestly. "This is the chance we've been waiting for." There was no time for more questions. They put on their shoes, splashed water on their faces, and ran to Clara's room. The hallway, usually quiet at that hour, was bustling with activity. Nurses moved quickly, preparing equipment, checking monitors. Clara was already awake when they arrived, surrounded by doctors explaining the procedure. Her face showed a mixture of fear and hope, the expression of someone who sees a rope being thrown after weeks adrift. "My little ones," she said when she saw her daughters enter the room. "Come here." The girls ran to the bed, careful of the tubes and wires. Ian stood at the door, giving them space for this crucial moment. "The doctor said they found a new heart for me," Clara explained, stroking Sophie's hair. "I'm going to have a big surgery, but I'll be better after." "How long will it take?" Haley asked, practical as ever. "Several hours," replied Dr. Roberts, who was supervising the preparations. "Your mother will be sleeping deeply throughout the procedure, and afterward she'll need a lot of rest to recover." Clara looked at Ian, who remained discreetly in the background. "Mr. Blackwood." "Ian," she called, using his first name for the first time. "Could you come here for a moment?" He approached, feeling the weight of the medical team's gazes. In recent days, after the initial recognition, he and Clara had spoken briefly during the girls' visits. Cautious conversations, filled with her gratitude and his embarrassment, gradually evolving into something more comfortable. "Thank you for everything," Clara said, her voice low but firm. "For taking care of them. For being here. You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do," she insisted. "And I want to ask for one more thing. Anything. Take care of them while I'm in there. They're going to be scared." Ian nodded, feeling the weight of the trust placed in him. "I promise." A nurse approached, indicating it was time. Clara hugged her daughters one last time, whispering words of love and courage. Then she looked at Ian again. "I'll be back," she said, more to the girls than to him. "We'll be waiting," Ian replied. As they took Clara away, Sophie began to cry silently. Haley remained stoic, but her eyes revealed a terror that broke Ian's heart. "Doctor." Roberts explained that they could wait in a special room for families of patients in surgery. It was a less austere environment than the usual waiting room. It had comfortable sofas, a television, some books, and a coffee machine. The first few hours were the hardest. The girls were too restless to sleep again, but too tired for any activity. Ian tried to distract them with simple games and stories, but the anxiety was palpable. Around 7 in the morning, Haley sat next to Ian, her eyes fixed on the door, as if expecting the doctor to appear at any moment. "If she doesn't wake up," she asked in a low voice, "are we going to be alone?" The question hit Ian like a punch. It wasn't just fear, it was a practical concern, the kind of thought no 5-year-old should have to have. He held Haley's small hand in his. "I will never leave you alone," he said, each word filled with conviction. "Never." Haley studied his face for a long moment, as if assessing the truth of the promise. Then, in a rare gesture, she rested her head on his arm and closed her eyes. "Okay," she replied simply. The hours dragged on. A nurse would occasionally appear to report that everything was proceeding as expected. Vague words that didn't alleviate the anxiety, but at least didn't bring bad news. At noon, Ian managed to convince the girls to eat a little. Sophie played distractedly with her doll, while Haley drew in her notebook, the same drawing over and over, 4 figures holding hands under a big, bright sun. At 2:30 in the afternoon, when the wait had become unbearable, the door finally opened. Dr. Roberts entered, removing his surgical cap. His face showed signs of exhaustion, but his eyes were smiling. "The surgery was a success," he announced. For a moment, no one moved, as if the words were too fragile to be disturbed. Then, Sophie let out a cry of joy, and Haley jumped to her feet. "Is Mommy okay?" Sophie asked, jumping with excitement. "She's recovering very well," the doctor confirmed. "Says the new heart is already working. Now she needs to rest, but everything indicates a positive recovery." "Can we see her?" Haley asked, always direct. "She's still in the recovery room. In a few hours, she'll be transferred to the ICU, and you'll be able to see her briefly, but she'll be very sleepy." Ian felt a relief so intense that his legs buckled. He sat down again, trying to process the overwhelming emotion. 3 hours later, a nurse came to get them. Clara had been transferred to the ICU and, although still under the effects of anesthesia, was beginning to wake up. "Remember, just a few minutes," the nurse instructed as she led them. "She's very fragile." The ICU room was silent except for the steady beeping of the monitors. Clara seemed asleep, her chest rising and falling in a gentle rhythm, a new rhythm, driven by a heart that just hours before had been beating in another body. The girls approached cautiously, almost on tiptoe. "Mommy," Sophie called, her voice small in the large room. Clara's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first. When she recognized her daughters, her lips curved into a faint smile. "My loves," she mumbled, her voice hoarse and distant. The girls smiled, tears of relief streaming down both their faces. Carefully, Sophie touched her mother's hand. Haley, more daring, leaned over and pressed her ear to Clara's chest, listening to the beats of the new heart. "Thank you," Clara whispered, her eyes meeting Ian's, who was watching the scene from the doorway. Haley remained with her head on her mother's chest, her eyes closed in concentration, as if confirming the danger had truly passed. Her small body finally relaxed, her shoulders visibly dropping, the tension of 2 weeks dissipating with every strong, regular beat she heard. "It's working just right," she declared seriously, lifting her head. "The new heart." Clara smiled again, her eyes already closing with fatigue. Before falling asleep, she murmured once more, "Thank you for bringing them, for being here." The girls remained by her side, watching her sleep. Ian stood at the door, witnessing the moment a family began to piece itself back together. The surgery had been a success, but the real new beginning was just starting, for Clara, for her daughters, and as in ways he didn't yet fully understand, for himself. 3 weeks after the surgery, Clara was ready to be discharged. Her recovery had exceeded expectations, the new heart was working well, and tests showed promising results. That morning, Ian arrived at the hospital bringing hot chocolate for the girls, as had become his custom. He found them focused on something they were drawing at the small table in the waiting room. "Good morning," he greeted, placing the drinks on the table. "What are you two working on?" Sophie quickly looked up. "It's a surprise," she exclaimed, covering the paper with her hands. "You can go see Mommy first," Haley suggested with a faint smile. Ian nodded and headed to Clara's room. In the last few days, or with her stronger, they had truly talked. Conversations that were initially uncomfortable, about how she had been fired during cutbacks at his company, about the struggle to find another job, about the bills that had piled up. Clara never blamed him directly. "It's business decisions," she had said with a dignity that shamed him. "You didn't even know me, sir." But Ian knew her now. He knew the determined woman who, even when sick, prioritized her daughters. And Clara was also beginning to know him, not the impeccable executive, but the man her daughters called friend man. When he returned from the room, the girls were waiting for him anxiously, hiding something behind their backs. "We made something for you," Sophie announced, barely containing her excitement. Haley stepped forward and handed him a colorful piece of paper. "It's a present, to say thank you." Ian took the drawing, feeling a lump in his throat. On the sheet, 3 figures holding hands smiled under a bright blue sky. In the center was him, flanked by Haley and Sophie. Below, in carefully formed letters, was a message. "Thank you for helping save our mum. You are a special friend." "I did the faces and the sky," Sophie explained proudly. "Haley did the rest, because she writes better. Ian held the paper as if it were the most precious thing in the world. In his life of material achievements, he had never received anything that touched him so deeply. "It's perfect," he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "Mommy said she'll be able to go home soon," Haley commented. "Are you still going to visit us there?" The question surprised him. In the past few days, Ian had arranged everything to help Clara start over. A suitable job at his company, medical assistance, financial support. But he hadn't considered what his relationship with the family would be like afterward. "Of course I will," he replied with certainty. "In fact, how about we go to your house today to get everything ready for your mom's return? She'll need a comfortable place to continue recovering." The girl's eyes sparkled. "Can we go now?" Sophie asked excitedly. "I've already spoken with your mother and the doctors. She'll be discharged in 2 days. We have time to prepare everything." After saying goodbye to Clara, promising to return at the end of the day, they left the hospital for the first time in weeks without the shadow of worry. The building where they lived was in a modest area of the city, 3 floors of exposed brick, no elevator, the gate needing a coat of paint. Haley had the key tucked away in her coat pocket. "It's on the 2nd floor," she informed him. "Apartment 2B. The apartment was small, a living room that also served as a kitchen, a bedroom that Clara shared with the girls, and a cramped bathroom. Everything was clean but showed signs of wear and tear, a patched-up sofa, faded curtains, clearly second-hand furniture. "We'll have to clean a lot," Haley declared, looking around. "Mommy likes everything neat and tidy. And she'll need a special place to rest," Sophie added. "You're right," Ian agreed. "Let's make a list of what we need." They spent the next hour planning. The girls showed him every corner of the apartment, explaining how Clara organized things. Ian took notes, impressed by the clarity of the children's observations. At the supermarket, they filled 2 carts with healthy food, cleaning supplies, and basic pharmacy items. Ian watched the girls seriously discuss which fruits their mother preferred, comparing prices with an awareness that children their age shouldn't have. At the department store, they bought new sheets, soft blankets, quality pillows, and a reclining armchair for Clara to rest in. At a flower shop, they chose a simple but colorful arrangement for the table. Back at the apartment, they began the transformation. Ian helped move the furniture, creating a more open space for Clara to move around. The girls cleaned with determination, showing they were used to helping with household chores. "Mommy always puts things like this," Haley explained, organizing the medications by their scheduled times. "And she likes it when there are flowers," Sophie added, placing the arrangement in the center of the small table. By the end of the afternoon, the apartment was transformed. It wasn't luxurious, it was still the same modest space, but now it had a cozy feel. The pantry was full. The bed was made with new sheets, and the armchair was positioned near the window where Clara could get the morning sun. Ian looked around, observing the result of their work. The girls wore expressions of pride, admiring every detail they had prepared for their mother's return. "It looks nice, doesn't it?" Sophie asked, holding his hand. "Very nice," Ian agreed. Standing there, in the middle of that simple but love-filled home, Ian felt an emotion unlike anything he had ever experienced. Throughout his career, he had closed multi-million-dollar deals, been applauded at shareholder meetings. None of that, however, had given him the feeling he had now. For the first time, he was absolutely certain he was doing something truly important. Not something that would generate profits or headlines, but something that made a real difference in the lives of real people. "Do you think Mommy will like it?" Haley asked, her voice revealing a rare vulnerability. "She's going to love it," Ian assured her. "You did an amazing job." On the way back to the hospital, Ian looked again at the drawing he had received. 3 figures holding hands under a blue sky. A simple symbol of human connection that was worth more than all the status symbols he had accumulated over the years. He carefully placed the paper in the inner pocket of his jacket, close to his heart, and continued driving, eager to tell Clara about the apartment's transformation, and perhaps about the transformation happening within him as well. The day of the hospital discharge arrived with a blue, sunny sky, as if nature itself was celebrating Clara's return home. Ian parked in front of the hospital, checking for the third time that he had brought everything: the borrowed wheelchair, extra cushions for the car, water, and the first medications Clara would need to take during the journey. In the room, she was already dressed, not in a hospital gown, but in simple clothes the girls had carefully chosen, a light blue blouse and comfortable sweatpants. Her face, though still pale, had enough color to show that life had returned to this body that had almost given up. "I'm ready," Clara said when Ian entered, her voice a mix of anxiety and determination. "Doctor..." Roberts gave his final recommendations, while a nurse helped Clara into the wheelchair. Haley and Sophie bounced around, barely containing their excitement. "Remember, no physical exertion, frequent rest, medication at the exact times," the doctor emphasized, handing Ian a folder with all the instructions. "Fill him and come back for the weekly checkups." The journey to the car felt like a small procession, the nurse pushing the chair, Ian carrying the bags, the girls walking beside their mother, one on each side, like little guardians. "We're going home, Mummy," Sophie repeated every few steps, as if she needed to confirm that this was real. When they arrived at the small apartment building, Ian parked as close to the entrance as possible. Without hesitation, he lifted Clara into his arms, ignoring her protests that she could try to walk leaning on him. "Doctor's orders," he said firmly. "No exertion for the first week." He carried her up the stairs as if she weighed nothing, while the girls ran ahead to open the door. When they entered, Clara gasped. The simple apartment she had left weeks ago was transformed, clean, organized, with small touches that made it welcoming. Colorful cushions on the sofa, new curtains letting in natural light, fresh flowers on the table. "You did all this?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "We helped," Haley answered proudly. "Ian showed us how." Ian carefully settled Clara on the sofa, adjusting the cushions to make her comfortable. He immediately began organizing the medications on the small shelf in the living room, grouping them by administration time, exactly as the doctor had instructed. 6 different kinds, each with its own schedule, he explained, showing her the color-coding system he had created. The blue capsules in the morning with coffee, the white ones after lunch, and so on. Clara watched with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. The elegant, powerful man who had never noticed her existence when she cleaned his office was now here, in her small apartment, organizing medicines with the precision of a pharmacist. Throughout the afternoon, Ian remained by their side, taking care of every detail. He replaced the flowers on the table with fresher ones he had brought. He checked the pantry to make sure nothing was missing. He adjusted the height of the sofa so Clara could reach her water and books without effort. "You don't have to do all this," Clara said, watching him adjust the light so it wouldn't bother her eyes. "I know," he replied simply. "I want to." As evening approached, Ian asked the girls, "How about we make dinner together? Something special to celebrate Mum's return." Sophie's eyes lit up. "Can I help make juice?" "And I can chop the vegetables," Haley offered. "Mummy already taught me how to use the small knife." The tiny kitchen became even smaller with the 3 of them working in it. Ian showed Haley how to safely chop the vegetables, while Sophie squeezed oranges with intense concentration, her tongue sticking out the corner of her mouth with the effort. Together, they prepared a simple but carefully made dinner: roasted chicken with potatoes, fresh vegetables, bread that Ian had bought at the best bakery in town, and Sophie's orange juice, served proudly in a glass pitcher. The small table was covered with dishes that seemed more delicious than they really were, simply because they had been prepared with so much love. Clara was carefully helped to the table, where she watched her daughters serve the food with the seriousness of someone performing an important task. As they ate, Clara looked around, her daughters smiling, the apartment organized, plenty of food on the table, and she felt for the first time in a long time that despite all the suffering, this moment was one of pure hope. Ian, who was discreetly watching her reactions, looked up and said in a calm voice, "When you're fully recovered, I want you to come work with me again, but not as a cleaner. I want you to have a better position." Clara almost choked on her juice. "A better position? But I don't have the qualifications." "You have intelligence, determination, and integrity," Ian interrupted. "Qualifications can be acquired. Character cannot." Clara smiled, too emotional to speak, and just whispered, a thank you. The silence that followed was comfortable, the kind of silence that exists between people who don't need to fill the space with words. It was Haley who finally spoke, holding Ian's hand with the seriousness only a 5-year-old can muster. "You're our family now." 4 simple words that hit Ian like no elaborate speech ever could. Family. A concept that had been just an abstraction in his solitary life of professional achievements. Ian took a deep breath and smiled too, an unfamiliar emotion expanding in his chest. Looking at that small table, at that simple dinner shared on mismatched plates, Ian understood that he had finally found everything he had always been searching for without knowing it: belonging, affection, and a true new beginning. "Yes," he replied, his voice firm despite the emotion. "We are a family." And at that moment, under the golden light of dusk filtering through the window of the small apartment, 4 unlikely people formed a perfect circle of human connection, a circle that none of them had ever imagined possible, but which now seemed inevitable. As if the universe, in its infinite wisdom, knew exactly what each of them needed to find. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so